The following is a summary of the Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Tetzaveh, Parshas Zocher, Erev Purim, and Sunday Parshas Tisa after Ma'ariv, which was Motzi Purim, Hey Tov Nun. Sefer HaSichas, Tov Nun, page 340. One of the things that happened in that year in Tov Nun was that Shabbos Parshas Zocher came literally before Purim. Purim was a Sunday, and Shabbos Parshas Zocher was on Shabbos. And consequently, the Rebbe speaks about the juxtaposition of Parshas Zocher and Purim. The reason why we read Parshas Zocher before Purim is in order first to have the Mechias Amalek, the blotting out of Amalek, and then Mechias Haman. And then immediately the blotting out of Haman, first the Zechira, the remembrance, and then the Asiyah, the actual action. What is the Hoirah, the directive in Avodas Hashem, from first having the Zechira and then the Mechia? First the remembering and then the action. The war with Amalek, in fact, is a very key avodah in Klal Yisrael, in one's Avodas Hashem. Zocher es asher asa locha Amalek, the Torah tells us, remember what Amalek did to you, b'derech b'tzeischem mitzrayim, asher korcha b'derech. And in every single generation, a person must see as if they themselves are going out of Mitzrayim. Not only in every generation, but every single day. A person needs to exit the limitations and constraints of their body and nefesh bahamis, and consequently, there is the element of the battle against Amalek every single day. And not only in terms of going out of Mitzrayim, but also in terms of coming into Eretz Yisrael and building the Beis HaMikdash. We're told that there were 3 mitzvahs which Klal Yisrael were commanded before they build the Beis HaMikdash, when they entered the land. The first was to appoint a king, the second was to eradicate Amalek, and then the third mitzvah was to build the Beis HaBechira, to build the Beis HaMikdash. So we see that Mechias Amalek, the blotting out of Amalek, comes before the building of the Beis HaMikdash. And so too will it be la'asid lavei in time to come, as it says, Milchemes Hashem ba'Amalek midoir doir in Parshas Beshalach, and that midoir doir includes also the Dora de Mashiach, the generation of Mashiach, where there will be the Metzius, the existence of a menaged, of an opposition, and there needs to be a battle waged against Amalek. We'll be able to understand this by understanding the connection of Purim with Matan Torah. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Vayisyatzvu besachtis hahar, that when the Yidden arrived at Har Sinai, they stood underneath the mountain. Says the Gemara, Kofa Hashem aleim har kegigis, that Hashem uprooted Har Sinai and held it over them like a barrel. And he said, if you accept the Torah, good, and if not, there you will die. And the Gemara says, Mikan meidor rabba le'iraisa, from here, since there was a level of coercion, it wasn't clear that they freely accepted the Torah out of their own will. Later, in the times of Purim, Kimu v'kiblu haYehudim, the Yidden accepted upon themselves willingly, and that showed retroactively that the acceptance of Sinai was in fact a willing acceptance. Now, Chassidus explains, what does it mean, Kofa aleim har kegigis, this idea of coercion? It doesn't mean that they had their arms twisted to do the opposite of what they wanted. Rather, it means that it wasn't done out of their free will and choice. Why? Because the arousal by Matan Torah wasn't from them. It wasn't from their own free choice. Rather, it was due to a revelation from above. However, later in the days of Purim, when they reaccepted the Torah out of their own free choice, then Kimu v'kiblu haYehudim, it was revealed then retroactively that the acceptance at Har Sinai was also willingly and from their own free choice. The word which the Gemara uses is kofa, the idea of kafiyah, coercion, which is the avodah of iskafia, of suppression. That means that there is the existence of an opposition, which is the Yetzer Hara, which looks like a mountain, and one needs to suppress the Yetzer Hara. One needs to go against the Yetzer Hara. Now, when a person's avodah is not through iskafia, but rather it's because the light of the neshama shines by the person, and they don't need to fight against the Yetzer Hara, then the result is an avodah which comes because of a revelation from above. It's not seen clearly that this is their own will and desire coming from below. Whereas, specifically in a time where there is a lack of light or a darkness, that shows that when the person does accept the Torah, that is coming from their own free will. This was emphasized by Matan Torah when there was a kofa, a revelation from above, which caused them to accept the Torah, but then they were on the level of tzaddikim, whereas on Purim, when they were on the level of Baalei Teshuvah, this was quite clear that their acceptance was from below. With this introduction, we'll understand the necessity why there needs to be a battle against Amalek. Because the novelty of Purim over Matan Torah was that the avodah was willingly, and this is emphasized in the battle against Amalek. What did Amalek do? Asher korcha baderech. He cooled the Yidden down. This is the concept of sterile avodah. Mitzvahs anoshim melumada, avodah by rote. Not willingly, but just robotically. And this battle against Amalek needs to be baratzon gomor, meaning completely willingly from the person, generated by and in and from the person. Reishis goyim Amalek, the head and the beginning of the whole existence of the opposition to Kedusha is Amalek. And that's why after the Exodus, there needed to be the battle against Amalek, to emphasize that the Exodus wasn't only because of a revelation from above, but also it was generated by the desire and the free choice from below. Similarly, by the building of the Beis HaMikdash, it will be only after the dissolution of the enemy, of the opposition, that it will be possible to build a Mishkan, a dwelling place for Hashem. Now, just like there's an advantage of Purim over Matan Torah, so too in Amalek itself there is an advantage in the remembering Amalek over the actual erasing of Amalek. By way of introduction, Zechira and Asiya, remembering and doing, are not in just two different situations, but rather before there is the Mechia, the erasing and the blotting out of Amalek, there needs to be the remembering of Amalek. Because the remembering of Amalek brings a person to an arousal of hatred for Amalek. And that hatred needs to permeate a person's deeds so that the actual erasing of Amalek is done willingly and by free choice. And that's the advantage of the remembering over the actual doing. Because when one actually does erase Amalek, one has reached a level where one has the fuller potential to eradicate Amalek. Whereas when one is only remembering Amalek, then one has not yet reached the level that one has the capacity to eradicate Amalek, but one is still in the preparatory stage of generating the hatred for Amalek, so that they will have that ability. And that is generated from within the person. Ultimately, however, the tachlis is the actual eradication of Amalek. And consequently, in that year, in the year Tafshin Nun, when Shabbos Parshas Zocher was on Shabbos and Purim was on Sunday, you had the juxtaposition of these two items. On Shabbos, the remembering and the arousal of the hatred for Amalek, and on Sunday, on Purim, the actual eradication of Amalek, which the whole reason why one eradicates Amalek is because that shows that Amalek's whole existence was in order to arouse the iskafia, the suppression and the eradication of Amalek within the Yid. One can connect this with the Parshas HaShavua. The Parshas HaShavua of Parshas Tetzaveh. In the beginning of the Parsha, it talks about Lahalis Neir Tomid and the lighting of the menorah Me'erev ad Boiker. The Iker Neiros of the menorah were lit by night in order to illuminate the darkness. And its reflection in our avodah is when we are in a situation of darkness, where there's a lack of light. Our avodah needs to be the avodah of iskafia, of suppression, kosis lamoir, beaten. Together with that, however, there needs to be the feeling that there is no real metzius existence to the opposition, but the shemen is in fact zoch. It doesn't have any dregs, and there is no metzius of pesoilus, of waste in the oil, but rather it's absolutely pure. Rashi in the Gemara in Menachos, Daf Peivav Amud Aleph, says that the first oil which was used for the menorah was megargaroi berosh hazayis. They would take the olives at the top of the olive tree, because since they were exposed to the sunlight, they ripened first. So in other words, the zayis, to which Yidden are compared to an olive, and olive oil was taken from the top. This is the idea that a Yid is bishlemus, is ripe, is completely full and ready to be used for the menorah, and at the same time it needs to be kosis lamoir. So in other words, we see this combination of kosis, of iskafia, and then having full transformation in being used for the menorah. We see a similar thing in Parshas Kisisa, in the Machzis HaShekel. Even if a person needed a kapara for the worst aveira, which was the Chet HaEgel, nevertheless, by giving a Machzis HaShekel, which a person gives ba'ayin yofa with all their metzias to Hashem, this can be transformed into the adonim, the sockets for the Mishkan, into the communal sacrifices, and this can lift up the whole head of the Jewish people, separating them from the metzius of the world. And this is clear in the Megillas Esther, where they're not called Ivriim, in the sense that they were on one side and the world was on the other side, but rather they're called Yehudim in the sense that the way they were one with the very essence of Hashem. So in the milchama, in the battle against the opposition, there is in fact a tremendous advantage, because through the descent into the refining of the lowest element, one actually reveals the very essence until one can transform the opposition into Kedusha. And this is the concept of the turnabout in Megillas Esther. Esther represents Helem v'Hester, concealment, and in the Megillah of Esther you do not find the name of Hashem. And Achashverosh, say Chazal, is Hushchuru Paneim Shal Yisrael, the faces of the Yidden became darkened by the tremendous Gezerah of Achashverosh. However, it was specifically in that moment of darkness that there was revealed the Avodah B'Koyach Atzmam, the complete acceptance of Torah with Mesiras Nefesh, which transcended Tam V'Das, which was the level of a Goyrel, the level of Purim, and in fact it was generated by Yidichida, which is the level of Yom Kippur, and hence Purim, Yom Kippurim is a Yom Kippurim. And that's why the name of Hashem does not show in the Megillah, because one goes higher than the name of Hashem in this revelation. And this revelation permeates even the lowest of levels, so that there should be v'napoichu, a complete turnaround, v'yishlatu ha'yehudim heima b'seineim, the Yidden having a complete control over their enemies, v'rabim me'amei ha'aretz misyadim, and many of the people of the land converting to Judaism, as it will be la'asid lavi la'az yapeh chamim. And the relationship between the Geula of Purim and the Geula HaSida is hinted to at the end of the Megillah, where it says and finishes with Divrei Shalom ve'emes, words of peace and truth, Shalom l'chol zarei, peace for all their generations, which is the concept of Avos Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael through the revelation of Yechida, Shalom v'tachlis, as it will be by the coming of Mashiach. And the Megillas Esther, Eina B'Teila La'olam. Purim in that year was on a Sunday, and it was mutar ba'asiyas malacha. Purim, one is allowed to do malacha. Chassidus explains the reason why we are allowed to do malacha on Purim is because then you have a revelation of the very essence, which is higher than all the worlds. In worlds you have elevations, and there needs to be a shavisa, a concept of resting from elevation, whereas when you hit the very essence, then you can have a weekday and at the same time have a Yom Tov. Especially when it falls on a Sunday, when that's the Yom Rishon, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yochid Ba'olamai, and the Shir Shal Yom is La Hashem Haaretz Umleya. Hamaisa Hu Ha'ikar, the deed is the most important. The Yidden accepted on Purim what they had previously accepted by Matan Torah. So therefore we need to increase in all matters of Torah mitzvahs. Oira is a reference to Torah. Yukar is a reference to Tefillin. Mishleach Manos, Matanis Levyonim, Mishta v'Simcha, Avos Yisrael, Achdus Yisrael, Tzedakah, Simcha Shal Mitzvah, Tov Leiv, Mishta Tamid. And it is correct that one should organize 3 Farbrengens in a way of Chazaka. And it is known that what a Chassidish Farbrengen can achieve, even the Malach Michal can't achieve. The Yehi Ratzain, that through this juxtaposition of this Geula of Purim to the Geula of Pesach, then there will be the Farbrengen of all Yidden together, which includes all previous generations, Hekitzu v'Ranan u'Sheichne Ofar, with Mordechai, Esther, Moshe, and Aaron in Mohem, and the Rebbe will be with them until V'nayadati Shama, I will meet with you, says Hashem. There will be the Farbrengen together with the Eibishter, and we'll be able to say Marav ve'etzboi v'oy mazeh. We'll be able to see clearly godliness. Zeh Hashem kivinu loy layikanef oid meirecha v'hoyu einecha royes es meirecha.